who had planned to go to assessment, if you had planned to go to assessment in science, you are in the right place, and we are grateful you're here. We will get started right away.
Welcome, welcome. So glad you're here. Thank you for taking time out of the last days of summer to join us either here on the Zoom or perhaps you'll catch the recording later, in which case we are also grateful.
We are, and if it works in any way for you to have your camera on, that is lovely, because it is wonderful for us to get a chance to see who we're speaking to. If it doesn't, we totally understand, and we hope that you will participate in the chat and ask any questions that you'd like. Hey, Vanessa, it's good to see a familiar face. It's good to see some familiar names in the group. Shall we get going with our land acknowledgement, Cheryl?
Yes, sounds great. Thank you. Just by way of introduction, my name is Cheryl Babin. I'm a designer of professional learning for the now named Alberta Professional Learning Consortium. And I'm really excited to be here with my assessment partner and friend, Adelie Penner, who is also a designer of professional learning. And so we're really grateful that you have joined us today. I popped a link into the chat, which is a hyperlink to the slide deck that we will use today. We really encourage you to keep that and bookmark it, find a spot for it, because we've loaded it with assessment resources that we hope you will find really helpful in your practice. So Adelie and I are both coming to you today from beautiful, beautiful Alberta. You'll notice this video footage on the screen, which is drone footage of all the different landscapes that show the diversity and just the beautiful ecosystems and all of the nature that we can admire and capture and be grateful for. And in saying that and noticing that and treasuring those summer days that we may have had outside, we want to also acknowledge the Indigenous people who've cared for this time from time immemorial. We are recording today from within Treaty 7, which is the traditional Blackfoot territory, home to the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai nations. Also the Ithaka Stona Nakota Nation, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Good Stony First Nations. South of me here and a little bit to the east of Adelie is the Tsuut'ina Nation and also the Otipemisiwak Métis government, nations within Alberta's District 5 and 6. Thank you so much. And please, if you would like to use this video footage for use in your schools or with your students, we encourage you to do so. It really is a beautiful way to capture all that is natural and really quite stunning. It's yours there to use. Thank you. For our agenda today, we've clipped the description of our session. Adelie and I have partnered a couple of times to provide some science focused assessment resources. I said assessment a lot of times there, just in case you were wondering what we were talking about today. Today we have designed a little bit of a different process whereby we're thinking about how do we start with the learning outcomes? If you're new to science this year or a new grade, you'll be learning those new outcomes. And we'll think about integrating scientific methods, multiple methods, into our practice. And so how do we design the learning so that we can really reveal evidence of that understanding? And we also want to model for you how you might capitalize on how to employ triangulation of evidence. So looking at products and performances, conversations, observations, and even sort of portfolios, collections of evidence. You'll notice that there is a little takeaway bag at the bottom there. Whenever you see that slide on the screen, it's a note to you that there are links available we've put in some templates, some resources and different pieces in there that we hope you will grab and take a look for. So thanks for being here. We hope you enjoy. Please let us know if you have any questions. You can use the chat. We are very flexible and want to make sure that we're doing our best for you here today.
Can you still see my screen?
Yeah. Oh, it just disappeared.
Sorry, it's something weird going on in the background here. Okay, awesome. So we're going to begin our time together today with a way that many of you will probably be thinking about with the end in mind. Where do we want, here we sit at the beginning, and some of you may have started your school year thinking about where do we want to have our students land? What are we hoping to accomplish in our time with them this year? What does that look like? And so what we thought we would do today, Cheryl and I were working on this partly yesterday and this morning again, we were looking, and new Learn Alberta has changed. So if you haven't been there as of August 18th, yesterday, you may see that things have changed. So when you go to the main science page, and we're going to bring it up for you here just in a minute, you'll see that there you can still see your kindergarten to grade 6. You'll see that the front page now has the front matter, which before was on a side click, but you'll also see that all K-12 curriculum has been moved to the site. And so we want to show you what that looks like a little bit. So when you're thinking about how do I pull our learning outcomes, you can find them really easily. So I am just going to share the screen, just switch the screen that I'm sharing with you. And we should see the new Learn Alberta site, the landing page now. And so when you click on the curriculum here, you'll see all of the core curriculum and all of the complementary curriculum, because we've now moved from K-12 onto this site. For science, when you click on science, oh, I clicked too quickly. You'll get to a main page that has your K-6 science, and you'll have your 7 to 9, and then you'll have your 10, 20, and 30 sciences here that you can click on and that you can print. When you go to your science, you will see here that you can still have your search function, which we have, Cheryl and I have both talked about in several of our sessions, how much we appreciate. You can maybe queue for a word like plant. You can say, I want to see where plant is in grade 3. And I want it to be in science. And I want it to include just the curriculum, or maybe I want resources too. And then you'll see here that you can quickly find the guiding questions. You can find the guiding pieces that you had looked at and used before. If you go to if you click on, in this case, grade 3, it's going to become our example. You'll see very quickly why I'm focusing on this for our session today, because we had to pick a theme. And so Cheryl and I have picked one to move our assessment work through. You'll see on the side here that you can go to the multi-grade view, which you are used to seeing. So if you click on that, you'll see that you can again see in this case, grade 3 and 4. You could move back so you can put grade 3 in the middle. You can also continue to change the view of it and only have grade 3 come up. One of the things that we want you to be aware of is when you hover over a learning outcome, and I'm just going to go down to the learning outcome that we're going to think about for today. Yeah, I was here. Students analyze and describe how plants and animals interact with each other. When you hover over and you click the I button, you will get to the organizing idea, guiding question, learning outcome, as you always have, and you'll be able to go through the competency and the resources. But as Cheryl and I were scrolling through and taking a look at the resources in preparation for our chat today, we noticed that the Pearson links for some reason don't seem to be up right now. And so we don't want you to feel frustrated. There's nothing more frustrating than going to a resource piece and feeling like all the links are not available. Right now, it just seems to be a quirky thing with Pearson because it's just come online. We wonder if they'll be updating them. And so we just wanted to quickly show you a couple of the changes to New.Learn Alberta while we're working through this. Cheryl, I feel like I probably missed something. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's good. I'm just posted a link to how to sign up for a New Learn Alberta account in case you are new. Many of you have had one for several years, but pass it on to any new teachers in your circle. And that link is there. And please don't give up if you are worried about those resources not being accessible. I'm sure that they will be fixed ASAP because we are using them and they're great. So thanks for your patience.
So when we look through science, we chose the grade 3 organ and idea under living systems. It's a bit of a it's a bit of a slant. Cheryl and I do like to talk about plants and animals. So we thought we would go to living systems this morning with you folks. And to take a look at the understandings of the living world, earth and space are deepened by investigating natural systems and their interactions. The guiding question is, how do plants and animals interact? The learning outcome, as we read previously, is students will analyze and describe how plants and animals interact with each other within the environments. We want to just stop here, and Cheryl and I just want to have a quick conversation with you about some of the verbs and nouns as we're going through the learning outcomes, because this is really important for setting up that end in mind in terms of what are we actually assessing and what do we want to assess. And so when we look at the learning outcomes, we're going to be assessing the verbs as they're moved forward and as students show what they understand, know, and can do with those verbs. And the nouns will serve as our concepts. And when we teach in grade 3, we might think, well, a word like analyze and describe, how might a student understand what that looks like? And Cheryl is fast and furiously putting links into the chat for us, which we really appreciate. Thank you, Cheryl. And she has a link to an Alberta Ed curriculum resources. And if you search for science verbs, what you will find is a link to all of the verbs that are used within the science curriculum. And they link to wall charts that you can be putting into your room. So when students see the word analyze, they automatically understand that in this case, they are to consider in detail the order to find meaning and determination. So they're going to be looking at relationships, patterns, similarities, and differences between two particular items. And so when they see the word analyze, we hope that they're able to determine this is what I'm being asked to do. So it's also a learning prompt for them. And when we look at describe, what does that actually mean for us in regard to our learning outcomes, but also as a verb, as an action, how might a student describe something? What does that look like? And so describing orally or in writing, perhaps in a video piece, perhaps visually in an image or a graphic, qualities, attributes, details, and again, qualities, attributes, details, and other features of something. So they're going to be determining some relationships and patterns, and they're also going to be communicating some attributes and details about how plants and animals interact with each other. And so when we stop and think about that vocabulary piece, we now have a very clear idea about how we might think about building our tasks from here. I'm noticing a little bit of things happening in the chat. Cheryl, do you want to speak to what we might be thinking about?
Yeah, thanks. The by looking at some verbs as a grade team or with other teachers that in your district or perhaps in your school that teach the same grade, to develop a consistency or a common understanding about what do we believe this outcome is really asking for? What does analyze and describe mean at a grade 3 level in this context? And so what we want to do is to make sure that we have common understandings wherever possible. It allows us to be able to verify student learning. It provides us with more likelihood that our professional judgment will be more aligned and consistent. And Amanda's posted another great question about um, a context where a curriculum verb implies a higher cognitive demand, but common classroom practice ends up watering it down. And
Great.
yeah, really great question because we really want to take a look at those verbs because it helps us stay on track. It helps us know what it is that we actually have to report out on. And so just a reminder that Alberta Education has asked that we assess the learning outcome and report on it in some way, whether that's on your report card or in somehow communicating that with parents. That part is not predetermined for us. But one of the things that it can do is it can say, okay, what does it mean to analyze? And so if we talk about that and break it down as a grade team and we say, okay, well, this is what it means. And as what we get through our example today, I hope that you'll see these are the observations that we're making, the kinds of things we're looking for in an analysis of an outcome, and also how students use that vocabulary, the scientific vocabulary and the tiered words to apply it to the content. So we've got a couple of examples there that we hope will clarify some of that.
Yeah, and Deanna, you're asking to see the graphics posted. Each of those links in that document should take you to a graphic. We're not sure if they're working right now, but we will make sure they're ready to go for you shortly. I have written an email to our science group who actually created that page. And they're not sure why the links aren't working. So they're hoping it will be done by the end of today. So you should be able to have that. No worries at all. I appreciate the question. Rhonda, I'm not sure that they're available in French yet. I know there was a team that was working on it. I'm not sure where they're at in completing it. Cheryl, do you know an update on that? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I don't have one.
I'm looking for it. I'm not
Okay.
sure about that. So
Okay.
but a great question, and I'm going to follow up with it with your name. And if you don't mind just texting me your email address for that, if you're looking for it in French, Rhonda, and doesn't you don't have to put it in public for everyone. You can just message me specifically. I can make sure that I get back to you on that.
And and while you're waiting for the science links to come back up, if you look up math verbs, and you click on the package, they have several links there. They've got links to these, and in fact, that's what we borrowed for today's slide deck. So you'll see them there. Cheryl, do you want to carry on with some of the
Yeah,
vocabulary pieces?
yeah. Here's an example of what we're talking about, and there will be more words than are just included here. This is just a sample of how we can look at clarifying expected vocabulary from an outcome. So what we've done is we went through the learning outcome and all of the cusps to take a look at some of the vocabulary that would be necessary. So we drew from two different organizing ideas, the living systems, and those are some of the verbs, just some. And here are some of the scientific methods verbs, because of course these verbs, analyze, collect, develop, question, they come from, they transcend all of the other organizing ideas and are meant to be woven through. The other angle that we took while looking at these words is to think about the many EAL students who are who are learning in the context of your classrooms. And so we want to separate out some tier one words that are encountered day to day. Those are some of those ones in there. Polysemous are words that have multiple contexts, but one is a sort of an everyday meaning and one is also a scientific word. So something like chain has multiple references to what that could be. It could be a gold chain that you wear around your neck. It could be a food chain. It could be, to lock up a gate in many different ways. And so in this context, we're looking at it in reference to a food chain. Tier two words are important across many science topics. So those would be some of those scientific method verbs and, the idea of observations and environment that shows up often. And then tier three words are really specific to that science topic, so for this one, that's where you get into herbivore and omnivore. And of course, you're going to use that with any little dinosaur lover that you know in your life as well, right? But ecosystem is a word that's implied in the cusp that you'll probably use in your conversations, but it's not specifically listed. So I actually, after we did this, I ran this question through AI and it came up with a beautiful list that also helps to solidify some of that for you. So underneath this takeaway, there's 3 different links to different resources that we hope can help you with this type of thinking about how do we support all of the learners in our care and how do we really target that in our assessment.
And I like the way that, Charlotte, you've been chatting about this, our words in science, because I think they come back to that question about, how do we do this and not water it down in our classroom? I think as we think about science, it is precise. And we think about the precision in our language. And we can sometimes, wow, I wonder, can a grade 3 student really think about or be able to understand, investigate? Well, they also know the word Diplodocus, and they also know every single dinosaur name, and with precision. And so I think it's important that we think about what are these words that we're encountering within our curriculum, and not to the point that I think Amanda was making earlier about we can define them for our students, but have them use the correct word in the correct way as they move forward, because that's what's really going to help with being able to assess what they understand, know, and can do. When we start to limit vocabulary, we can actually limit the ability to which students can demonstrate their knowledge. And so the more we can be precise with our verbs and nouns, the more we're able to create that space for that learning to happen. And so Cheryl and I kind of took a look at if we wanted exactly, Amanda, something like knowing or memorizing a set of words might not actually ensure comprehension. That's fair. That is absolutely fair. But I think by not having students understand that word, creating the definition and those wall charts that we talked about that can anchor it, can bring them back to understanding. And then of course they're practicing analyzing. And so rather than saying, can you find the patterns? Can you find the relationships? Having them understand that you're analyzing right now and practicing it will help with that comprehension piece. And so we took a look at that learning outcome, and we took a look at the cusps, and we put together a list of, from that particular learning outcomes, what might students need to know, understand, and can do. And so for the purposes of this hour and a little bit that we have together, we chose to focus on one. We chose to focus on how students analyze and describe how plants interact with each other and within their environment. And so that's where we came to, and now then we got to the place where, okay, how might we take this learning outcome and think about the scientific methods and instructional practices, and how might we move this forward into a learning task for our students? Cheryl, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the scientific method?
Yeah, I think that when most of us think about scientific method, we think about the one that we did in junior high and all of the labs that we had to write up over the course of our science learning. One of the things that we often had to do was think about the hypothesis, the procedure, the materials. We talked about variables, manipulating and controlling variables. Well, what we really see coming alive in this curriculum is the idea that there are multiple different scientific methods. And this visual helps to articulate some of those differences. The one that I was just referring to would be sort of an experimental investigation where you are actually manipulating variables. And this curriculum doesn't actually have that happen until grade 5 and 6. A comparative study is an investigation that is just that, allowing students to really build observation skills, questioning skills, prediction skills, while looking comparatively at various objects and phenomenon in nature. Well, sweet Jane Goodall gives us a really good example of a scientific method that is about descriptive and observational. Also an incredibly valid way of thinking about science learning and investigating with collecting data and representing and interpreting that. You'll also see that oral stories and traditional teachings are an important way for us to consider as a scientific method for understanding how the world works and how all of the pieces are interrelated and interacting. Students going in to do research and forming relationships with the land also are valid forms of scientific methods. So it's important that you pluralize that method and consider the different types of investigations that can really support the learning outcome as best you can. So.
And you may look at that oral and stories and traditional teachings. Cheryl and I tend to work in Treaty 7, and so you'll see the Blackfoot circle here. If you work with the Anishinaabe folks, you'll also see a circle. As you work with different First Nation and Métis groups, you'll want to make sure that you're working with their traditional teachings and understandings from their elders. I just want to point out our Treaty 7 bias showing up on our slides.
Another piece that we wanted to highlight for you today is the addition of design thinking and a design cycle that often comes into play as a scientific method. And the one that we chose, and there are many to choose from, of course, includes the empathy component, which Adelie and I really wanted to highlight as an important part of assessment. It might not ask you specifically for students to develop empathy about the user in their scientific investigation or the problem that they're trying to solve, but in the science overview and the subject description or overview, it does say that we are trying to become thinkers and critical thinkers who gain multiple perspectives, incorporate multiple ways of thinking and cultural practices. And so this addition of the empathy component in the scientific method can also really support that. And we'd like to share with you a really quick video that talks about the launch cycle. This is a great John Spencer video that talks about a design thinking framework that can also be used to support your assessment practice because it shows students how they can approach learning, prepare their thinking, and we're watching to see as well as teachers surfacing that evidence of their learning through their conversations, observing them to try again when they have a setback or when something doesn't go as they predicted, that's part of that scientific learning, teaching them the perseverance and the tenacity to work through challenges as they go. So let's watch this quick little video about the launch cycle.
Design thinking is a flexible framework for getting the most out of the creative process. It is used in the arts, in engineering, in the corporate world, and in social and civic spaces. You can use it in every subject with every age group. It works when creating digital content or when building things with duct tape and cardboard. Although there are many models for design thinking, we have developed the student-friendly launch cycle. Here's how it works. In the first phase, students look, listen, and learn. The goal here is awareness. It might be a sense of wonder at a process, or an awareness of a problem, or a sense of empathy toward a group. Sparked by curiosity, students move to the second phase, where they ask tons of questions. This leads to understanding the process or problem through an authentic research experience. They might conduct interviews or needs assessments, research articles, watch videos, or analyze data. Students apply the newly acquired knowledge to potential solutions. In this phase, they navigate ideas. Here they not only brainstorm, but they also analyze ideas, combine ideas, and generate a concept for what they will create. In the next phase, they create a prototype. It might be a digital work or a tangible product, a work of art, or something they engineer. It might even be an action or an event or a system. Next, they begin to highlight what's working and fix what's failing. The goal here is to view this revision process as an experiment full of iterations, where every mistake takes them closer and closer to success. Then, when it's done, it's ready to launch. In the launch phase, they send it to an authentic audience. They send their work to the world. And ultimately, that leads back to a place where they can look, listen, and learn. Design thinking is a
So when we move into the next piece, Amanda, sorry, I just saw your question here about the empathy piece. I think when we look at the true design thinking, we're thinking about how do we solve a problem, and we often put ourselves into the perspective first. And so how might the student empathize, and then they could check their thinking with others. I appreciate Cheryl. Yeah, it is difficult, and we are absolutely recommending this at all grade levels and supporting that piece. But I think if we look through this here, you'll see some pieces where we've added opportunities for peer feedback and conversation that get to some of those ideas about how might I see what somebody else is learning or their perspective as we move forward. If you've been in, I get it. Cheryl and I have also worked with quite a few neurodivergent folks, and we do need to think about them. When we think about keep that in mind as we move through. If you've been in conversations with Cheryl, you'll know her commitment to taking people outside and to sitting and thinking and being with nature. And that's something that's profoundly important to me as well. And so when we thought about this analyzing and describing plant interactions, we thought about, well, could we have students create a field journal, whether it's going to be digital or they're going to sketch note or they're going to learn how to take field notes. At this point, we were leaving that a little bit to learn more about the student piece, but we're just sort of designing our tasks at this time, where they would document at least 3 examples of interactions between plants and animals that they're observing in their schoolyard, or maybe we could take them to a park or local environment. We wanted them to include drawings and photographs, perhaps some labeling, explanations of the interactions that they saw, whether it was pollination, shelter, is it a food source? And as we were thinking about the task, we automatically wanted to bring into perspective our observation, conversation, product, and portfolio triangulation. And so what might that look like? And so from an observation perspective, and again, this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination, we could certainly watch to how students who attend to the detail during their field walk. As they're walking, what are they noticing first? How are they carefully recording? Which of their senses do they tend to draw from first? Are they including all of the pieces? Not necessarily that we want them to eat what they find out in a public place, but those would be part of our observations. And then in terms of conversations, what are they asking each other? What are they asking you? And what are you asking them? When you ask them some probing questions, like, I noticed you indicated that this animal is dependent on that plant. What makes you think that? To check the depth of their understanding as you're going through, having those casual conversations will help you know where they're at. Perhaps you need to stop the group and give them some probing, etc. But you'll know that through that conversation. And then, of course, their product, or whether you're building this as part of their portfolio, their field journal entries. How accurate were they? How complete were they? And how did they use that vocabulary? So that's how we've started building out the tasks. And this was just our initial brainstorming. This is our first draft, thinking about what could that look like in light of our scientific methods. Well, then we went back and we refined using some ChatGPT, because we were like, there's some pieces of that don't feel like we're getting to everything that we wanted. We didn't feel like, well, how would we put this in a grade appropriate language for our grade 3 students? We prompted for a field journal. We wanted to be more specific and precise about what might that journal look like. And then we also wanted this not to be just a teacher assessment piece. We wanted to include student voice, but also peers into our field study journal. And so we asked for some peer feedback and some self-reflection into the prompt. And here's what we got. We started to look at, so we got analyzing and describing plant interactions. So the task would be a nature detective. We would take our field journal outside and we would look for some of the things that we just talked about, but you'll see the language is different here. And we also had some noticing prompts that were taken directly from our curricular learning outcome and from our CUS. So this language comes right from our curriculum and right into our learning task. And then we thought about, we wanted to continue and think about assessment of these pieces. And so how might we then start to engage our assessment practices to employ that triangulation of evidence that we wanted to get to? And we want to start with this prompt. Cheryl, do you want to set us up?
I just love this. We want to be able to capitalize on the things that students say, their conjectures, their ideas. And we want to provide space in our assessment designs for their voice to emerge. And then we want to ask them, how do you know? Or what evidence do you have to support that learning? So please watch this little clip and we'll come back to this idea in just a moment.
I have evidence that proves my dad's a space alien. He speaks a weird language. He drinks green stuff. He says he's from Albuquerque. I'm not buying it. I mean, just look at him. And one more thing, he has a spaceship. The evidence doesn't lie. My dad's an alien.
The highly advanced Audi A6, named to Car and Driver's 10 Best.
It's quite an adorable little 30 seconds in your day, isn't it? I hope you enjoyed. Do you want me to continue here, Adelie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when we think about how do we look at their interactions? How do we watch from an assessor's perspective when we are trying to gather the evidence that we're seeing? And so take that noticing. The students are going to come up with their ideas in response to the task. But what are we looking for? We are looking for evidence of that assessment. So we're looking to see about the details that get recorded. How do they treat the plants and the animals in there? And how might they record them in their journals? How they treat them is reflective of their understanding of the fragility or the I guess taking care and moving towards stewardship of the land. And we also want to get them to start looking to each other. We know the classes are large. We want students to talk to each other about the learning and to provide those options in their interactions. Go ahead, Adelie. This one
Yeah,
about conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I had myself muted there. Yeah, just to build off what Cheryl was just talking about, in our conversation pieces, we can build on some of the things that they're noticing. And what makes you think this animal is dependent on that? We talked about how could this interaction help both the plant and the animal? And this gets to some of the pieces that we were chatting about earlier with Amanda and thinking about our inquiry cycles. In pairs, take turns explaining drawings in your journal so that partners can ask a question or tell you something that they learned from your observation. So we can be really implicit about, I learned this from you and I've learned this from you. And so as we're moving forward, we'll see peers taking a look at, oh, I see what other people are seeing that maybe I'm not, or they're seeing it in a different way. And how interesting is that? That our takeaways are different. And then we want to look at what our field journal could actually look like. What your field journal is going to be looked for: clear drawings, accurate, complete explanations, the use of your science vocabulary. We're going to have our students do some self-reflecting, circle something that they've written or that they've drawn and say, this is my best work because, and maybe it was because it was refined with their peer. And then swapping journals with a peer. And each person writes 1 star about something that they did well and something that I wish you would have added a little bit more or explained something here a little bit differently. And so all of that, the students will have some good feedback and we will have some good feedback before we bring in something from something that's finished. I often think about Austin's butterfly at a time like this. As we're moving through this field journal, we are prompting and we're giving perspective and receiving perspective all the way through so that students have time to iterate, they have time to add, they have time to notice different things as they move through so that their field journal is truly the best that they could offer to the extent that they're willing to work with us. Cheryl and I do work with kids every day. I don't want to sound like we're blind to those things, but it is built in, success is built in, hopefully, to the way that we've looked at this. We've got a couple takeaways here that maybe Cheryl, you want to address, so that folks can leave with something from today's work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. You've seen the skills and procedures, the verbs earlier, but we've also added a link that talks about the progression of those skills and procedures as they work through K-3, and then we can move on to 4-6 as well. But knowing that there are steps to that development, and so if you find that your students are not quite at a place that you think you want them to be, the progressions can help you by looking backwards so that you can design and be really explicit about the additional things that you want to mention or teach in the course of developing your tasks and going through the experiences. These are templates that can help you with your students, getting them to make predictions, how to organize an investigation. And then this is a teacher checklist for how some teachers like to keep track of observations that they are making. And number 5 is a show me what you know template where you can give students a choice in how they want to represent what they're learning. And it's a great formative way to capture what they know. If your students' writing skills are not as telling as maybe what they can talk to you about, then that's always an opportunity as well to interview them or rotate them through in small groups or stations so that they can talk to you and you can jot down some of their ideas or annotate their drawings as a way of showing that evidence of learning. So hopefully those will be useful to you. Make a copy, change them for your context, make them better. And yes, those links should be clickable. I hope they are. We'll double check on that. Thanks, Michael. Go ahead, Adelie. I'll check those links.
Okay, this is we wanted to again include some journaling pieces since that's what we've chatted about. When you see access to our slide deck, you'll be able to click on these links also. Some of you may be familiar with John Muir's laws. He's got quite a few different prompts and journaling guides and ideas about how to move kids forward through the scientific method of observation and evaluating, looking at some pictures and icons to show things, how to capture some of their observation and ideas, how to bring in some numeracy pieces to the numbers that they're counting, how might a field survey structure work, and what are some of the ways in which we might record our observations as we're moving through. So we found this to be a really helpful guide as we've been working with students in field studies. And we find that as students understand the precision to which we are asking them to observe and how to lay out a field study journal, we find that they're helpful. They're helpful to building that moving forward. We're just going to wrap up with a quick piece around how we might have students claim their evidence, and then we'll finish up for our morning.
Let's come back to my dad is a space alien. So one of the tools that we have added in here for you today is a thinking routine called Claim Evidence Reasoning, or CER. And it's really about getting students to explain their thinking with clarity and with that proof. You know, as scientists, we need proof. So the overarching question of this is, who is my dad? You know, my claim is that my dad is a space alien. And so we can call it that, saying to students, you know, this is the evidence, that's what we need, or that's your claim. How do you know that you can support that? So let's go to the next slide, please. Please, Adelie. Then we start looking at the evidence. And so this, as you saw in the video, do you like the evidence board up on the slide there? Evidence number 1, he speaks a weird language when he's gargling. Let's capture that. And let's draw those red strings to all of these things to say, this is the evidence to support my claim. He dresses weirdly and he drinks green liquids. These are my evidence pieces. And then we go on to the reasons that help support this thinking. This is really developing critical thinking and communication competencies that you will also find linked to the learning outcomes in New Learn Alberta. And so here you can see that the evidence is supported with reasons. This is important because aliens are not from Earth, so they do not speak English. And it's okay that the justification, it's not so much about how accurate the reasoning and the evidence is. All of the time, it's really about how sound and how supportive that is, particularly if it's an opinion piece, then you want students to be able to back it up with their own perspectives and evidence. And so there's a link to the graphic organizer and 2 other links. There's beakers and ink and a Edutopia science inquiry using and demonstrating the CER thinking routine as well. So hopefully that will help you. Thanks everyone for helping out in the chat with sharing the slides. This is another set of takeaways for you that will support your thinking in building the skills and dispositions, as well as the knowledge in all of the organizing ideas for your students. When thinking about assessment, we want to really develop their assessment capabilities and knowing where they are in terms of the learning targets, how they are progressing along that scale towards proficiency, and how they can develop that awareness by looking at other students' work and discussing evidence as a group and with other people and reflecting on the success criteria. So we've added in a few different tools for you in hopes that that will support your thinking as well. Last year, Adelie and I designed and facilitated a 4-part assessment series that was called Tell Me What You Know About Science. And so in the chat, I've just dropped in an additional link. I hope you are not overlinked today. But this 4-part series resource is the landing page, and it has further opportunities for you to engage in conversations specifically about how to use AI, how to develop student agency and support, how to design investigations that really support the skills and competencies of your students. So that resource is for you. And finally, there was one other thing that we wanted to share. I'm just going to lead you back to the APLC, excuse me, website, which is not the Learn Alberta one, but it's our Alberta Professional Learning Consortium website, where you can filter by grade and subject to find everything that we hope that you will want. We also encourage you to reach out to talk to Adelie and I and all of your consultants in your regions to support you with questions and things that you would like. Adelie put up this survey for you. It's really valuable. If you don't mind, please taking a minute before you leave us today to respond to this survey and give us really specific feedback, because it does come back to us anonymously, unless you want to put your name in it, of course. But we used just as assessment should happen, we use your feedback to inform and improve our practice and become better at what we are trying to do in support of you and your students' learning. Adelie, it was a pleasure to work with you today, and thank you everyone for your engagement in the chat with your questions and your conversations. We are going to stay on the Zoom here. I will close out the recording, but if you'd like to talk through any questions or challenges that you have, we have a bit more time, and we're happy to be here with you. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cheryl. It's fun as always. Wish you all the best with your school year.
Yes, have a great startup, everyone.